Hello everybody, welcome back to my channel. My name is Becca and today we are going to be talking about some wish list plants that I had that turned out to be a little bit of a disappointment for one reason or another. This video is also kindly sponsored by Squarespace. So basically I wanted to showcase plants in this video that I was really excited about, and then I got them and I was either underwhelmed or just whelmed. You know, they were just like, oh, okay, here it is. It wasn't a plant that I was like instantly obsessed with, and maybe since I've had it for a while, it's given me issues, so I'm like less obsessed with it. All of these reasons. So we're gonna start off with the El Choco Red. And this isn't to say, again, that I don't love this plant, because I do, but when I opened it, I was like, oh, okay, so it's an El Choco. I mean, it's beautiful, but like it didn't have the signature red back on the leaves that it came with. I think one of the leaves had it, and it was packaged great. The seller was awesome, but like at the end of the day, it wasn't the plant that I was like wanting to check on all the time and like get updates about for myself. And I think that's just because right now it is still so small. So as it grows, hopefully my mind will be a little bit more intrigued by it. It's just not a plant that I'm gonna gravitate towards when I'm thinking of like the coolest plants in my collection. And also it does this really annoying thing where it'll start to put out a new leaf, and then partway through coming out, the leaf will just completely dry up and die before it's even out. That's happened twice. And obviously that's because there's a care issue on my end. I think that I'm not watering it enough, or it's not getting enough humidity. That's usually the reasons that something like that would happen. Totally my fault, but I don't have plants do that very often. And when it happens, it's just really annoying. And it's kind of like an indicator to me that the plant is a little bit more of a diva than it might let on. A little disappointing, still a part of my collection, and I'm happy to have it, but just didn't live up to the full expectations quite yet. The next plant is the Riplass Paradoxa. Now I'm going to talk about this specific Riplass Paradoxa because I did recently buy another one, which based on reading the comments, it's kind of uncommon to find one so big at especially the price that I got. So I feel like extra lucky that I grabbed that. It was one of those things where I was like, I don't need it, but also this is really cool and I haven't seen huge ones like this like really ever. So I'm gonna get it. It's a plant that I don't have to worry about generally, like at all. And so for that reason, this one was really disappointing to me when I opened it because I thought it was gonna be much bigger. So I actually ordered this one off of eBay, and it's the only time I've ever bought a plant off of eBay. A lot of the time when I buy plants online and then I open them up and see how much smaller it is, I'm like, oh, well that explains the price, or like that just isn't the full hype that I was wanting. And that is the reason that I much prefer plant shopping in person now, just because I feel like it's just so much nicer to see the size and the shape and the quality of the plant before I buy it. Now, if you're going through like a good and reputable seller, this will happen less often. So anyway, when I received it, it was like just barely spilling over, like a 4-inch pot maybe, and it's still in a 4-inch pot. And I've had this plant for 3 years, 4 years maybe. I've had it for a really long time and it still is just really small. Since I've had it, it has grown a little bit longer, so it's a little bit cooler now. But to get to the point to where my other one is that I just recently bought, it's gonna take like probably another 4 or 5 years, I'm assuming, even living in like really great conditions. Riplass generally are really easy plants to take care of, and I would really suggest them if you like trailing plants but don't necessarily want the care responsibilities. I'm trying to think of the word. Yeah, I guess like the care, responsibility, and necessity of a more leafy plant like a heartleaf philodendron or a pothos or something like that. Let's take a moment to talk about Squarespace, the all-in-one platform to build your brand and your business online. If you've ever been intimidated before about building a website, I have to say that Squarespace is the place to go because they make it so easy to make a beautiful website. They have really user-friendly drag and drop templates. Their customer service is next level. And they make it really easy to keep in contact with your mailing list. If you want to put like a little box on your website where you collect emails, maybe you send out freebies, Squarespace makes it really easy to collect and manage all of that. They also have really great blogging features with commenting. So if somebody has a question about something that you wrote about in a blog post, they can comment and you can comment back, and you can have a whole thread conversation right there on the page. And they also make it really easy to run an online store. We have a store through Squarespace for my podcast, Potted Together, where we sell merch, and we were also able to connect it to a third party that actually like fulfills the orders. So whether you're wanting to start a blog or sell products online or just have like a portfolio online, Squarespace is definitely the place to go. If you're interested, you can go to squarespace.com for a free trial. And then when you're ready to publish your website, you can use the code Becca Plants to get 10% off your first purchase of a website or a domain. Next on our list is the Begonia maculata. And this one was a wish list plant for me for a really, really long time. And it's definitely beautiful. I want to say that it is a plant that I'm happy to have in my collection. But generally, I was kind of like, oh, she's kind of needy, a little needier than I thought and was willing to give. And that's kind of why she looks a little worse for wear. She was living at the top of my plant wall, which was a bad decision on my part. I think that I just really wanted to have plants up there because it was looking so bare. I kind of picked off more than I could chew. Is that bit off? I sort of bit off more than I could chew with the plant wall at the beginning, and I'm glad that it has been a slow process, but it was very empty and there was lots of space for plants that I just didn't have yet. And I've slowly filled it in, which I think is like the best thing that I could have done because it's been easier to take care of it as it grows slowly. But the point is, this is one of the plants that I put up there just to like fill in space, and it ended up getting pretty neglected. And Begonia are just generally, well, cane begonia, let's say, probably other types of begonia, but I can only speak to cane begonia because that's all I've ever had. But they just generally like a little bit more humidity. They don't really like to dry out completely. And that's what I was having it do. And I lost like a bunch of lower leaves. And begonia will put out like new leaf shoots on an empty stem, especially, well, obviously like on like the node parts. So I'm not like mega concerned about the long-term look of this plant. I know that it will fill back in, but for now it just looked kind of ugly. And I was, let's say, a little disappointed in myself that I didn't do a little bit more research about this plant before I bought it to see like what exactly it would need. And it just disappointed me in that it wasn't super drought tolerant. One of the biggest things that I say about plant care is the plant is not going to change its ways just for you. And this is one of those situations where I learned that lesson. Like, this plant has specific needs because it comes from a specific place that has specific conditions, and it's not going to change its mind. It's not going to change like a whole structure of itself just because I want it on the plant wall. So that's a pretty relevant example of that notion that I have talked about. I talked about that in my book, actually. I've talked about that in a ton of my videos. But yeah, plants are what they are. And if you can't give the plant what it wants, it's not gonna be happy, and not much we can do about that. Okay, this next one, I'm like even hesitant to say because I don't wanna say that this plant has been, yeah, it's been underwhelming, but not disappointing. So I think that we're kind of like towing the line between those two categories in this video, but it is my Philodendron 69686. And I feel like the reason that I've been underwhelmed by this plant is because it's being very heavily overshadowed by other plants in my collection. So I've got lots of climbing Philodendron, especially with like funky leaves or something like that. And so I think that this plant just ended up blending in with everything else because it honestly, as soon as I pulled it out, I was like, wow, this is a cool plant and I really need to showcase it better. I think the reason that it's been underwhelming is because I just have it mixed in with so many other things that are like overlapping above it and below it and in between it, and it's not getting the proper stage that it should. And so when you have a large collection, that tends to happen. And so that's why I usually say to rearrange your plants pretty often, because then you get to showcase different plants and remind yourself that you have certain plants even, because even though I've been taking care of this plant pretty diligently, like I'm getting philodendron sap in my hair. I can feel that stickiness. Excuse me, please stop doing that to my hair. Because even though I take care of this plant, obviously it's very happy. It's been putting out consistent leaves. I just haven't really paid a ton of attention to it just because of the location it's in. And so for that reason, I've been kind of like, yeah, I have a Philodendron 69686 and I don't really think about it ever. This is my sign to myself and your sign to my sign to you to rearrange your plants, you know, move your shelves around, even if it is just like moving plants from the back to the front and just rearranging things so that you can see certain plants better. I think it makes a really big difference in how we care for our plants and the love that we give them, let's say. Okay, last plant on this list is my whalefin sansevieria, or the whalefin dracaena, whatever camp you're in, but sansevieria were reclassified as dracaena. It's kind of weird. I found a big pot of whalefin at a nursery. I think there was like 11 fins in it, and I didn't need all 11 of them, so I ended up breaking it up and sort of like selling and giving away a couple of pieces. And I was left with this one, and I gave myself this one because it was probably the nicest one from the pot. And it has put out this one, this whale, like tiny little fin, and maybe one other one that has died over the winter because winter neglect. Point is, this plant, and I think in my opinion, all snake plants are pretty boring, okay? Like, we're just gonna be honest with each other. They're super boring. They do like put out growth and like that's fun, but generally it's just not my type of plant. So I don't have that many anymore. I have this one, and then I have like, I think one other one that's in water that was given to me by a subscriber, which is really sweet. And I love that plant because it has a story behind it. And this one also kind of has a story because I was looking for this specific whalefin plant for so long, and then I finally found it, and it was the most exciting thing ever. But just generally, like, would I ever go to the store and buy a snake plant just to have it? Probably not, unless I had a super specific need, like a dark corner or something like that. I probably wouldn't, just because I find them super boring. They are steady plants that will live and not need much from you and all of those things, which is really great. But I have found other plants like that that are just a little bit more interesting to me, like the ZZ or even Aglaonema. Like certain Aglaonema are like that as well. I really just keep this plant because it literally doesn't need anything from me. I water it like every couple of months, which isn't enough, I know that, but it's greenery with like very, very little commitment. And that is going to be all for this video. Thank you so much for watching. I hope that you enjoyed hearing about some underwhelming plants. Not necessarily plants I'm gonna give away or be done with, but just some plants where I was like, oh, okay, well, I guess we're doing this. I feel like every collection is gonna have a few like that, and some people in some schools of thought would say to get rid of them, which if you are in the mindset of wanting to downsize, those would probably be the plants that I would go for first. So I don't know, maybe consider that as you go through your houseplant collection. Do some rearranging and see what plants are really popping out for you and which ones are kind of eh. And if it's worth the care, keep it. If it's not, give it to someone who will love it, and now you have an open space for more plants, or just to spread things out a little bit more. I'm definitely not a plant minimalist by any stretch of the imagination, but it is nice to have things not feel so crowded, and sometimes a declutter is necessary. So anyway, thank you so much for watching this video. If you like plant content like this, you can subscribe to my channel. I make plant vlogs, I make plant stuff like this, and I would love to have you around more often. Thank you so much for watching, and I will see you in the next one. Bye.